Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for coming on a late Friday afternoon and for joining us for this day and a half and the exciting program we have today, but also tomorrow, Saturday. So this is a national consultation conference, and as was explained, it is part of a number of events we are doing and we have done already in collaboration with the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics as well as Tabad Lab. So we've talked to students, we went to universities, think tanks, civil society, and it's one moment in this journey. Much more will happen in the coming weeks. So why did we convene this conference, and why now? Well, we believe, and I'm sure many in the room would agree with that Pakistan is at a critical moment, possibly at a turning point moment. The economic situation, as you know, is dire, and a difficult adjustment is needed to restore growth sustainably. And this is ongoing, and it is painful for many. But it is a particular moment also because, as announced yesterday, and this is pure, perfect coincidence and fortunate timing, and not at all planning, that there will be elections soon. And the newly elected governments will take charge after that. I think it's end of January. These are moments where we, and the World Bank, as a long-time partner of Pakistan, often step back and try to contribute to the policy debates in country and share our views on the development priorities of the countries we work in. It often takes the form of policy notes that we share with the new governments when they come into office. This time we decided to do it differently, and we decided to publish and make public today, in fact, draft discussion notes on a few topics. And they're short, but they're very focused. And we wanted to do this in advance and organize consultation events like this one today to listen, test our views, adjust them by listening to the many experts the country has and the many views that cut across society, the Pakistani society, on development issues that's facing your country. And this is one important moment among others, as I mentioned, and we'll have more in the coming weeks across the country. So we're here to listen, to learn, and participate to these debates. And in fact, I've brought my new notebooks to take notes in the coming day and a half. So the objective is to contribute to policy debates, hear from as many people as possible, and learn. So why is it important? Well, because as you will probably hear from the next speaker in his keynote, my friend and colleague Matthew Verghese, and possibly also tomorrow from Professor Stefan Derkon, that moments of crisis, moments of economic hardship, and moments of political transitions, sometimes, not always, can be moments of turnarounds, where consensus starts to build in society and among its elites that the country needs to durably change course on its policy compact. It does not always happen. In fact, Stefan Derkon and Matthew Verghese may share some examples, but most crises go to waste and are not turning points. But you will hear that most, if not all countries that have, over the recent decades, been able to have durable shifts and long periods of economic growth and development, where major policy shifts happen progressively, not overnight, have done so following some sort of crisis moment or some sort of economic or political transition. So when you're in development business, you need to be optimistic, always. And I am an optimist, so maybe this is Pakistan's moment and turning point. Now, if it is Pakistan's moment, the question is what it will take to have such fundamental shift, and what shifts need to take place to spur faster, more inclusive, climate resilience, development and growth over the years, sustained over the years. What reforms are needed for a brighter future? That's the title of the conference. Well, many in this room, and myself included, will say that partly believe that everything has been said on what needs to be done. At what level, and everything has been, many things have been written on what's needed, what type of policy reforms are needed for Pakistan. At what level it is true. Everybody says, yes, expand the tax base, fix the fiscal equation, fix the energy sector and its losses, reduce losses of SOEs, privatize, invest in education, skills, export more, etc. At that level, at a certain level, there is a sense of consensus on the direction and the ills that have dragged down Pakistan's growth and development, or has made it so volatile, with cycles of ups and downs and very slow progress on fundamentals like human capital. Yes, many, many reports have been published, very good work, many op-eds written, including in the recent weeks. It is actually very hard to come up with anything new at a certain level on what needs to be done or what are the problems. Yet, I think there's much more policy disagreement below this surface, below this consensual surface, on what actually needs to be faced, to be done. Expand the tax base, yes, but where? How much one needs to tax property? I had the debate recently with a businessman involved in real estate and totally agreed when I say, yes, expand the tax base, yes, expand property, then ask the question, what about a 0.5% yearly tax on the market value of the properties? I was a bit provocative, that's a bit high. Then we started talking. Then there was major disagreement. And this applies to many topics. Taxing agricultural income. I don't think there's a consensus on how much, by whom, at what level of government. Does spending authority needs to be at the local level, provincial, more to federal, more to provinces, more at the local? These are questions on which I don't think there's so much of a consensus. Should public spending in education be doubled to reach the average of countries that have similar incomes as Pakistan? Actually, a number of people I've talked to strongly disagree. They're like, oh no, the education system needs to be fixed first. Don't pour more money into it. I tend to have a different view. Is stunting, child stunting, which we will hear about bringing additional nutrients to pregnant mothers and babies, as the National Map program is doing? Or is it about something else? Is it about water and sanitation? When you get at that level, should you spend 1% of GDP on child stunting for 10 years to reduce that stunting by half? That's our estimate. When you're raising 9.5, 9.6% of GDP in taxes. Which means giving up some other spending. These questions are difficult, and I don't think there's consensus on that, and let alone on exports. Everybody says, yes, you should export, we should have more exports. But when you realize that the protections to incumbent companies in Pakistan, tariff protection, non-tariff protection, is what is what is constraining businesses from exporting, because it's so much more profitable to focus on the domestic market, which is protected. Then it's much more difficult. Then you have a much more difficult discussion. Should you reduce tariff massively in Pakistan to spur exports? Should you tax massively the non-tradable sectors to incite investments and productivity growth in tradables? Should cash transfers to the poorest be significantly increased? It's still lower than elsewhere. When I ask the question at that level, I hear very, very different views on these. So when I think there's on a number of topics, there's more disagreements than we think. So this is the level at which I hope the debates that we'll have in the coming 1.5 days will be set. Fundamental shifts, fundamental disagreements, fundamental turns, and I count on the moderators. In conferences, the moderators have the toughest job, so I count on the moderators and the participants to steer the debates that way, with short interventions, focusing on options and disagreements as much as possible. I mean, useful debates are they're fact-based, evidence-based, and focus on real issues where there's decisions to be made. And this is why we call the subtitle of the conference is Time to Decide. This is not time to say Pakistan needs to expand the tax base or Pakistan needs to export more. This is time to say, should Pakistan massively reduce progressively its protections of the economy and start to tax seriously property and agriculture and retail. I'll give you these examples because I know there's disagreements on this. So that's the title of the conference, Time to Decide. So there's many fundamental choices to be made today by Pakistan's polity. And one of these choices is the status quo, not do much, and muddling through the current crisis until the next one comes. But another one is to build some sort of consensus among the political, business elites, academic elites, and the society at large for fundamental changes of direction for the coming years and for a long time, for a decade at least, as we have seen in other countries. So how can we have an informative debate, and what's different in the format? You've seen we're trying to have a bit of a different format rather than to have a panel and a public and one direction. We're going to try to have all of you participate to the discussion. The instruction is that half of each session will have, not the end 2 or 3 questions, half of each session will be exchanges with you. So please do come forward. There's microphones. Again, I count on the moderators to have the time check to stop it looks like a boxing ring, by the way. My colleague Amna was saying we should have put boxing things around. But to stop the discussion after about half of the session so that we can open it up to an exchange. And please, in your interventions, be short and focus on debatable issues and disagreements. Don't come in to say we need to expand the tax base, or don't come in, please, on points like, oh, no government has done anything, the status quo will continue, why do you have hope anything will change this time? Because first, that doesn't help elude these important policy questions, but for that part, which is important, why are things haven't changed for such a long time? We'll have a very good session with Stefan Derkens tomorrow, and that's where you're going to be able to exchange on that, and you'll see the way out of this after an exchange with him and after his presentation. So let's see. All right, now I have spoken enough. I will hand over to my friend and colleague Matthew, but would like to end with one more point. While all the attention of the debates today in the newspapers, in the discussions, in the corridor discussions are focused on the short-term economic issues and crisis, and that's essential, that's understandable. In particular, among other things, the fiscal situation, the level of the reserves. And in fact, fiscal issues were supposed to be the first session in this conference. And I, to the dismay of my colleagues, I decided to change the agenda and start not with this essential topic that's fiscal, we'll cover it tomorrow, but start with other crises, to put on the radar and to discussion other crises that are more silent, that are much less spoken about and don't make the headlines, or at least rarely. And I'm speaking about the silent human, as we call it, the silent human capital crisis with abnormally low learning and school attainment rates, especially for girls, with abnormally high child stunting rates. 40% of the children under 5 are stunted on average. It may be increasing, in fact, in some parts of the country, and little progress over the past decade. So if we're starting this conference with child stunting, among the 5 topics covered, it is intentional, doesn't make the headlines. It is a human tragedy, and one that is a drag on Pakistan's ability to develop in the long term. And it's a complicated one with a lot of narrative, and as you will hear, a lot of debates, and the narrative that needs to fundamentally change, as you will hear. I'd like to thank our partners, Tabad Lab, as well as PIDE. By the way, PIDE is among other think tanks, private sector organizations, civil society, many thinkers, and policymakers, ex-policymakers debating, thinking, writing. It's a country where there's a lot of that, so we're contributing to it. And in fact, PIDE has a Islah initiative, which I follow very closely, and who are fond of solutions that are home ground, and I totally agree with that, and we're just here to contribute to these excellent debates. So welcome again, including those who are following us on time and who have waited patiently. Sorry for the delay, and thank you again for coming. Have good debates. All these consultations will inform the draft discussion notes that you have seen at the entrance that are online. Send us comments, send us your views, even beyond the conference. We'll update them, and the final version of these consultation notes will be the policy notes we will share with the new government when they're on board, inshallah. Thank you very much to all.